probably have a pop-up, and then here comes Sarah. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, good morning, everybody.
Hi there. Sarah, we had the chance to meet at the that focus group back in, was it November or December, and the
Yes,
town
yes, yes, yes,
meeting.
yes.
Yeah.
Well, it's good to see you all. Housing is one of my favorite topics, so I
All
couldn't be
right.
more excited to be with you to have a conversation and kind of get a sense of your thinking. And also just I have a lot of curiosity about sort of where you think Amherst College might have a role in the housing work of the community.
Excellent. How how shall we uh how shall we jump in? Shall we say some things for us, or do you want to, Greg? What do you propose to get the conversation?
I had, sort of informally proposed to Sarah that maybe, she just kind of give us like a top level overview of like, maybe of what Amherst College's motivations and concerns and, recent, work is related to housing. And, Sarah, perhaps maybe a slightly shortened version of the conversation you and I had, I don't know, some weeks ago now, but just to sort of get folks a sense of like, some of the internal thinking. I think that would be helpful if you're up for that. Does that sound good, Gaston? Or?
Totally,
Yeah, yeah,
totally.
perfect.
And I'm going to start with sort of
And
personal, like why housing matters to me, and then talk about it like from an institutional perspective and what I'm hearing from colleagues and what the different pressures are. And then maybe that would be a good segue into sort of like, where the college and the town might work together around housing. Does that seem fair? So this is going to involve some age-related math. So I moved to Western Massachusetts in 2008 from New London, Connecticut, where I've been working at Connecticut College. And one of the things that was stunning when I first arrived was
Sarah, luckily Grover just joined, so maybe we can
applause.
backtrack 30 seconds. Grover, Sarah's just kind of bringing us to Amherst College by way of her own experience arriving in the Valley.
Thanks. Apologies for my tardiness. Nice to meet you, Sarah, and thanks for coming to share
I'm
whatever
so excited to be
you're
here.
about to share.
Housing is one of my favorite topics. So anyway, I was saying that I moved to Western Massachusetts in 2008 for a job at Amherst College. And, I had been a renter, all my life beforehand and was stunned at how hard it was to find a place to live. And I didn't know that there were things like broker fees. And so as a young professional, having to show up with first, last, and like a bonus amount of money for the broker. And then the quality of the housing and the cost was shocking. And certainly New London County down in Connecticut was expensive, and the housing market there was very interesting. But I just I was shocked. And ultimately, in order to come to work, I had to get a summer sublet. So I would have shelter for the first couple of months, which gave me a little bit of space to be able to find more permanent housing, and ended up in Belchertown, right over the Amherst line. For the first couple of years, I lived here. And I saved all my money and ended up buying literally the cheapest house in the town of Amherst in 2011. And it was the cheapest house for a reason. And so like as a, again, young professional, it was a fixer-upper house. And one of the funny things about that was that I did not realize that when you buy a house, you have a lot of yard work that you have to do. So my life changed dramatically because all I was doing was like cutting down shrubs and like everything kept growing and all that kind of stuff. So worked for a number of years to like improve the house. Ended up breaking up with a person that I was living with, who I bought the house with, moved into a different rental property that was owner occupied in Amherst on Hillcrest. Ended up falling in love with someone with a kid in Northampton, so that is where I live now. So my dream of home ownership was very much, to be in Amherst, but sometimes love takes you in unexpected directions, all of that sort of stuff. But I think my journey as a young professional coming to the Valley and trying to find housing is similar to the kinds of experiences that I'm hearing from other colleagues. There is limited housing stock for professional folks. A lot of the rental properties are not really kept up because again, the market is so competitive. And so I have, folks that are just really struggling, with quality of housing, responsive landlords, all of that sort of stuff. But one of the plot twists in all of this that is different from when I came to Amherst in 2008 is that, for a lot of folks, they need to live with roommates for a much longer period of time in order to be able to afford to live in the area. And I don't think that it's necessarily unique or distinctive to Amherst. It's just things have gotten incredibly expensive. And the other thing that's kind of come up in my conversations with, hiring managers here is that it is becoming challenging to recruit some people to jobs in the area. So faculty markets are very competitive. And so, having housing, having strong schools, all of those kinds of things become very attractive to job candidates. And I think people, just like I was, are surprised at how hard it is to find housing. And that obviously has only gotten worse over time. So there's a lot of data that I can share, and we can talk about kind of the nuances of workforce housing for Amherst College. But I've been working on the question of housing and how Amherst College might play a role in supporting the development of housing, for the last 2.5 years. And a couple of things that I've learned along the way, and I suspect nothing I say is going to be a surprise to you. Again, I feel like I'm talking to the experts, and so I defer to you all to check me if my analysis is wrong, or if there's information that you can give me to help me understand the situation better. I'd really appreciate it. But as I started talking to affordable housing developers, so like Wayfinders, Home City USA, Valley CDC, there's a very compelling reason and story for building affordable subsidized housing in the area. And those developers are extraordinary and do incredible work. And then as I've talked with those kinds of developers and private developers, the thing that a college might bring to the table in a situation like this, which is land, does not actually have the same value that it did 10, 20, 30 years ago. Because the housing production costs have become extraordinary. And it's in part, because of the pandemic. So we know that labor and materials costs have gone up. But, Amherst has adopted the stretch code plus. And so which I think is, a decision that has positive long-term impacts for the community, but in the short term makes housing production very, very expensive. So there's these sort of interesting forces that are in play. So again, the things that a college might have done 20 years ago are not necessarily as helpful as they might be now. The other thing that's been sort of interesting in my journey in trying to understand housing and the role that the college might play is that zoning in Amherst is a bit tricky, and again, preaching to the choir, that particular challenge, but it's for a place that's really good at colleging, it's hard to figure out how to be good at housing. And so, as I've talked with folks and I'm like, where might Amherst College play a role? What might we do? I hear any housing in any category would be great. And it's really so I think that part of the reason why, I've been talking to Greg and wanted to come and talk with you all is just to sort of say based on your understanding, and I can't wait for the housing production plan to come out in April, what's your current thinking about, an institution's role in this? I mean, our concerns certainly are around workforce housing. So whether that's the hourly workers that work in facilities, or faculty or young professional staff, but also understanding that, colleges are anchor institutions and, also can contribute to the production of affordable housing through land and all. So just, I mean, that's kind of where my thinking is. I don't know if you have any questions right now, but I'd love to get your thoughts.
Could I go back and ask you something, Sarah? You said
Oh.
there's things a college could have done 20 years ago that they can't do now. And I just wondered if you had an example of two of that, because I'm
Well,
curious.
it's more about the cost changes. And so like how
Okay.
production costs have changed in 20 years. And so,
Okay.
so again, like a donation of land, 20 years ago would have been a game changer because the cost of building was lower. And now land really doesn't take a dent because the total cost of production is so high.
Okay.
You know what I
Thank
mean?
you.
So it's not like there was a missed opportunity 20 years ago. It's just that the housing field and market has changed. Oh, can I add one other thing that has been part of my learning? So John Hornick has been a mentor, and I assume you all know John, and really helped me understand housing. And when I first started to do this work, we had a conversation, and he pointed out that land is the most precious resource in the town of Amherst. Like we're not producing land. And so
Yep.
doing something like giant developments with single family homes on giant plots is not a good strategy because like like we're not getting new land. And so that's always been in the back of my mind because again, it's like what is the what is the production strategy and how might the college be a part of that?
Well, I can say, at least from my perspective, we've been looking at things that don't usually get looked at.
Yeah.
Maybe the biggest one is the ADU thing because the state has managed to come in and say you can't do some of the things that you are doing. So we have been looking around for where might those kinds of things happen. And another thing that seems to me like maybe something like Amherst College could do is some kind of small house cottage community somewhere. If you had a piece of land, it would seem to me it might be possible to some extent to reduce the construction costs by having a kind of a, I don't know, like smaller homes that are in a kind of developed as a cottage style place. I don't know the details of that. It's maybe just pie in the sky that I think that it could happen. But the kinds of things that are kind of not in the usual bailiwick of what is being done because what's being done doesn't seem to work so well anymore, as you said. My 2 cents.
Well, I actually have a question, Sarah, before I give my thoughts, which is, do you know how many Amherst College students rent off-campus housing versus on-campus housing? And is there a demand for on-campus housing that's not met for your students? We have some information about UMass Amherst, but I don't actually know about Amherst College.
It's totally different. So we are a residential college. So usually it is somewhere between like 20 and 27 students that live off campus. So, and we have a population of like 1,900 or so students. So our, it's student housing is not a thing.
Got it. That's helpful to understand because part of the hard thing in terms of our big production considerations or the, looking at the big picture is the pressure of student housing on the private rental market.
Yeah.
And most of that, like when we're looking at UMass Amherst, it's like, please build more student housing versus so that opens up a different way of thinking. But I would say the math isn't the same as it was 10 or 20 years ago in terms of what donating land helps in terms of getting to lower development costs. But I also want to say it's nothing, especially if it's done strategically, like the difference between donating land to just anyone versus like working with a a coalition or, you know, a group that has a real clear strategy. And it sounds like you're doing the information gathering to do this, to say like, what is a really high impact use of this land that would make it so that the donation helps bring down the cost of certain needed units that might not be economically viable otherwise. I think that's the right direction to go because it's still important. So whether that's, you know, working with Valley or Wayfinder or some other affordable housing developer, or working with a developer who's interested in creating missing middle, like 60 to 110 AMI housing, I think would, it depends on how the housing is managed and rented out, right? But would be valuable to the community. And by that I say, I'm saying this thinking about the AMI. I think one of the challenges is that when we put like income restrictions on it, then it creates a barrier for entry for young professionals, you know, grad students, students exiting college who want to stay and live here. It's like finding that kind of flexible housing that's naturally occurring, affordable, right? Like with the market is also needed. So those are just some thoughts. Clearly, rental housing that's affordable to people with low incomes is very, very much needed. And that doesn't necessarily solve the problem of the story that you told.
Right, and because I think it's sort of like, again, as frustrated as I was when I heard all housing in all categories, it's like, but that's actually real. You know, like that these challenges are impacting everybody.
There, from you know my point of view, what the trust can really contribute is making connections.
Yeah.
And kind of building a fire by finding kindling over here and a spark over there and a little gasoline somewhere else, and kind of putting it all together. And so in thinking that way, I guess my question is, what's the right tree to bark up with Amherst College? What are the moves that you see being feasible in 1 to 2 years that would be kind of could be very impactful in combination with the right other connections, whether it's a developer or the right kind of investor, etc.
So I want to tell a story about Williams College, and then I want to talk about sort of one of the things that you're already doing that I think is going to be helpful. So, Grover, this kind of builds on your story about sort of like building partnerships and stuff like that. When I first started doing more of this government affairs work, I went out to Williams, in Williamstown, because everyone talks about like Williams does all the things and like, you know, what is Amherst College doing? And so I wanted to kind of like go in person and talk to them about sort of what exactly does the work look like. And so whether it was learning about, you know, their relationship with the fire department or their role in the public schools, or like even, you know, how they're managing housing. And one of the stories that I was told is that a number of years ago, probably over a decade at this point, there was some catastrophic flooding that destroyed a mobile home park. And so like 300 people lost their homes, all that sort of stuff. And so advocates were organizing and trying to figure out if there was a way to make housing available for the low income folks that were living in this community that was destroyed. And so the advocates went to Williams and they were like, Williams, like, do you have some land? You know, can you help us build? And Williams was like, we don't have any land, like, you know, I don't know. And so the advocates went back and they were like, yeah, but there's this plot of land right here. And so the people at Williams pulled out their maps and they're like, oh yeah, that's like in this weird spot where, you know, it's not part of the core mission of the college. And so Williams partnered with a development corporation, and then there was another group, and then Connie Kruger, who used to be, I think, one of the town planners in Amherst, was involved in the project too. And they stood up this beautiful family and senior housing in this like, you know, piece of land that Williams had owned, but it was very much a partnership thing. And so in that case, it was getting a development corporation some expertise of a planner, which was, Connie's role in all of this. And then the technical expertise of the design and construction people at Williams. And so, the housing is lovely. It is not like in the core part of the campus, but again, was on sort of a scattered land holding of Williams. So I think that in that case, it was like the relationship between Williams and the town, they're always in conversation about like what are the strategic needs, where are there the possibilities for partnership, and not everything is going to turn into a thing, but having like good conversation and good dialogue kind of helps create readiness on both sides. So I think, I've been watching the housing production plan work very closely, and doing all the research and reading that I can do, because I'm trying to figure out like where might there be readiness. And so this kind of comes back, Gaston, to your 1 to 2 year question. And I think the housing production plan is going to hopefully be a bit of a roadmap in terms of where there might be possibilities for connection. I think the town also has to do a master plan at some point within the next 3 years. So there's stuff that's shifting locally that is going to make it, again, easier to sort of find where that point of connection is, in order to see, where we might go from here. Is that too vague, or is that helpful?
Well, I mean, I guess no, I mean, it's helpful to remind us that we need to think about the housing production plan as a communication tool and a guiding tool for partners like Amherst College. My question is, I guess, to kind of boil it down to like multiple choice, is Amherst College more likely and able to donate land, contribute cash, subsidize on ongoing basis, throw its weight around politically? Which of the modes of action that can contribute to making some changes is what we should try to be envisioning and guiding Amherst College to contribute?
Well, I mean, I think all of those things are within the realm of possibility. So remember, Amherst College offered to donate the land off Stanley Street for the DPW site. So we know within the history of things, Amherst College has done that. It also donated land to build the habitat houses that are there. I heard a story recently that, that required some really interesting partnership to manage the zoning challenges in order to stand up those houses. So that
Those
is
are the ones on Southeast Street?
Yeah, on Southeast Street.
Okay.
So it is a thing that has happened. So it's not like we would be like doing something that's never happened before. The financing is a bit of an interesting sort of thing. So in my conversations with Wayfinders, I know that there are ways in which organizations like Amherst College can contribute to things like a revolving loan fund, for builders, because if you're in Valley CDC or something like that, like one of the things that is a hindrance is the speed at which you get money. So cash flow can be an issue. So that is a thing. Like if we have a clear sort of roadmap of what the community is interested in, then it becomes easier to say this is the thing to advocate for versus something else. I know that there are some schools that partner with private developers. And so there is some amount of subsidy that goes into the construction of new houses. And then when the houses are sold, the developer pays back the college. I'm part of a national network that's looking at affordable housing and anchor institutions. And so trying to see like, what are the other things that colleges and universities are doing? So this is like the worst non-answer where I've not been specific.
No, that's very helpful.
But
it's very helpful.
It's like,
yeah.
I'm not here to say that any of these things are off the table, but I think that what's hard is around the housing conversation is there's like a lot of spinning where people are doing things, but there's no connecting. And as a result, then you have, I think, private developers, and even like, organizations that are doing affordable subsidized housing that are that are advancing their self-interest, you know, as they should. I mean, like, no shade on them at all, but like they're doing the thing that they do based on the land that's available and, you know, all of that kind of stuff. And so I think for Amherst College as an institution, it's like, what do we contribute to this as an institution, and one that's been around for a little bit of time, and you know is hopefully going to be around for like a little bit longer.
Question I have about that is, how would you know, or like, yeah, how would you know that something is a good partnership, or like what would um spark, oh, I'm making progress on my goals, my being you in your role. And this seems like a good idea to move forward because, you know, you named a number of different like possible institutions to partner with. And if we're thinking about our various conversations or our initiatives or our connections, like if I think of Amherst College and I'm talking to somebody with an affordable housing development idea, I might be like, oh, maybe they can donate land, maybe they can help with, you know, like I can think of this list. And so like what would that look like for you all, or how would you know that it would be a good opening to move forward?
Well, this kind of again goes back to the fact that we are experts in college and not experts in housing. And so this is where I think the struggle is, because again, like I've talked to the affordable housing organizations, I've talked to the developers, I've talked to elected officials, I've talked to town employees. And so that's where I think I'm stuck. And I just, you know, and I just want to be completely honest. And I think the donation of the land, the Stanley Street, Southeast Street land for the DPW, and that not working out kind of, I think just sort of gives me pause to sort of say like, you know, like we tried a thing and it didn't work. So, you know, what, again, sort of what might we need in order to do that? I will say, and this goes back to what John Hornigan said, is that, you know, land is the most precious resource in the community. And so, you know, is affordable subsidized housing the best thing that Amherst College can contribute? Or is it that there needs to be workforce housing? And so this is where I think the housing production plan is going to be so important. And to go back to, you know, what Carol was saying about, you know, ADUs, like, and I think Greg and I might have talked about this as well, is like, you know, if ADUs is the path forward that the town wants to promote, because one of the things we haven't talked about is infrastructure. So you need roads, water, sewer, electrical, which is why there's not going to be much more building in North Amherst. And so densification is the way to go. You know, is there, again, a way to do like a revolving loan fund or something like that? So this is where, like, you know, I don't know that the production plan is going to solve all the problems, but, you know, I'm really curious about their analysis, because we have limiting factors in the community in terms of what's buildable, how much infrastructure costs. And then again, like what role might a place like Amherst College play in the midst of all of this? So I know you all are very focused on affordable subsidized housing, and the housing situation is bigger than that.
Everyone has their hand up.
We're in line. Yeah, go.
I don't know what like at what group size is it like weird to put your hand up? I'm not quite sure, but you know, I want to reflect back and just a few things. And I've, you know, Sarah and I've had a conversation or two, and I've been talked to a couple other stakeholders and just chewing on things. You know, I think about this particular piece a great deal, you know, in my like calm time when I'm like, you know, doing the dishes or something, you know. But a couple of specifics and a couple more broad thoughts. You know, one is, you know, the revolving loan fund model, you know, is really interesting, and what's compelling to me about it is it can be done. You can take different level swings at it. You know, I mean, the Valley has a revolving loan fund in Northampton, right? So they got some CPA money, which was technically just one-time money, but because it's revolving, so Valley's recycled it like 4 or 5 times now on pre-development resources, you know, for their Northampton specific projects. or it could be broader. It could be available to multiple parties. That's a more complex financial structure, which would have to exist outside of a specific developer, and that raises some questions about where does it live. But that's a wormhole. But there's a model out there is the point, and there's certainly lots of national models for revolving loan funds. Sarah, just thinking about Amherst's specific position, and yes, I think the land calculation has changed for sure. But I think there's also there are some sort of unique relationships to the land that you do have, which is very separate, very different from what a standard landowner would be. And namely, you don't have urgency to like make money off that land, or you don't, there's no clock ticking. So some of the pressures that are often on the front end of these deals are not on you. And I think one of those things is like what that offers is the potential for planning more than an individual actor with an individual 1 to 3 acre site can necessarily engage in. And I think two things that come to mind. One is I think there's potential like for leadership here in the sense of like doing replicable stuff, doing, I think there's a scenario where Amherst can probably build prettier stuff, like, and more exciting, like significant stuff, than the average affordable developer in the average scenario is able to do. And that can be subsidized or not subsidized. I think there's some angles there. And then the other thing too is like the sort of that, and this is maybe my, my big point here in specific response to like how you highlight like where you're stuck, in that juncture. We talked about it some, but I think, in my mind, I don't like if we say like what is the thing that we should do, and boil it all down to one thing or one big step, or like at what point do we insert, it raises the stakes of that question, because if you get it wrong, all parties are disappointed. But I think given the sort of significance of the institution, I think another way to think about it is like, what are the multiple things we could do? What are the smaller bets we could make? I would love to see Amherst College play a role in supporting accessory dwelling units, and like doing some more substantial stuff too, but like those things could happen in parallel, they could happen in succession. But I think finding ways to make smaller bets that that A, can sometimes be faster, and B, lower the stakes, might be an interesting way to think about, like, for example, if we're talking about one big site, don't think about it as one big site. Think about it as 4 or 5 sites, 4 or 5 smaller sites where you can make 4 or 5 smaller bets. And that kind of approach tends to result in better, sort of more fine-grained urbanism anyway, if you do it right, but that's kind of, I think, where a sort of like a master, I don't want to say master plan in the top down sense. I just mean like thinking about a program instead of a project. I think that's kind of, so it's mindset stuff, but I think it can translate into the physical stuff. Yeah, I'll stop there, but.
Carol, you still got a question? Right.
Well, it's a comment that probably won't help anything at all, but I'm going to make it anyhow.
Okay, great.
I feel like what Sarah is saying to us is, we want to know what you want. And what we're saying to Sarah is, but we want to know what you want. And I think that's because the town doesn't know what we keep trying to come up with priorities that are consistent across the town, and we really don't have them. We're trying to get there, but I don't think we have them. We think we have something, and then the planning board doesn't like it. And think we're going to change the zoning rules, and 4,000 people don't like it. So I think that it's going to have to be something maybe like what Greg is talking about, but it's like take a little step and we'll try to catch up. And then you take a little step and we'll try to catch up, because there isn't what we wish there was, which is some like, here's the thing to do. There just isn't. I mean, I understand why you don't have it. You're not into housing, and we don't have it because I think because the problems are so huge that it makes it really hard to come up with a plan of how to address them.
I guess the spirit of my questions was more what are you likely to do, less than what do you want to do. But I take your point, Carol. I kind of drilling down here, Sarah. We have spent some time thinking and envisioning how we would commence a program of supporting the construction of ADUs. We've identified a lender out of Maine that wants to fund 500 ADUs in Massachusetts. They have a very reasonable set of terms. And we have a vision, for example, of identifying seniors who have houses that are too big for them and pitching financing an ADU possibly for them to move into, to then open up the home. And if we can find other source of financing or investment, then possibly get a commitment to have either affordable or workforce rates in that larger home. I guess the specific question I wanted to ask is, do you think there's a meaningful such population of employees at Amherst College who would be good initial targets to make such a pitch? In other words, homeowners who have some equity in the homes, who would like to stay in Amherst but aren't sure they could afford to, given the current market. So that's one question.
Sure.
And somewhat related, I'm curious whether Amherst College has any basically homes that the college owns that it makes available to faculty or employees. And so just to have another instrument of a program that could be patched together. So 2 questions.
Okay, so I'll tackle the ADU question first. So I know of at least one person who is in a house who has asked about ADUs. So I think that, again, it probably would be of interest. And again, you know, there is a housing shortage. And so I think that, you know, not quite field of dreams, if you build it, they will come. But I think that, again, like any increase in the production will be helpful. And I think for a lot of folks, again, there is sort of this stuckness around doing something for the first time. And so you are only going to ever build one ADU. And if you're buying a house in Amherst, you probably never constructed a house. So it's like you don't even necessarily know like all of the pieces. And so I think finding a lender, you know, and where I think Amherst College can be helpful in that is like promoting programs with its workforce. So I think we have about 550 full-time staff that live and faculty that live in the town of Amherst. So we're like obviously much smaller than UMass, but there is, you know, there are employees that live here. We can promote those kinds of things. So that is certainly of interest. I will mention that even though Amherst College is well-resourced, it is a nonprofit. And so we have to be pretty careful about like how we direct our funding and needing to align it with the educational mission of the college. So I think that there are ways to do housing and support housing that are in alignment with that, but it might mean that, you know, some ways of doing things or structuring things just aren't going to be allowed. In terms of the college's housing program, we do have one. And so there are a number of faculty-owned houses that Amherst College has the right of first refusal for. So it's sort of like, you know, faculty can buy into the program, you know, they live in these houses and then, you know, when they retire, whatever. And then we do have a rental program. So there are a number of properties that are rental properties. And so it's for visiting faculty or junior faculty so that they can come and stay until they find a place to live. And then and they're pretty easy to find in the GIS data for the town. And we pay taxes on all of that property, and it's close to $700,000 a year in terms of the property taxes that we pay on the rental stock. And that doesn't include the taxes on the houses that are owned, because that's just like regular owned houses.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for that data. And just you know, incidentally, if I have contact information for this lender, if I mean, we'll get more organized, but if this individual would like some information, we're happy to provide that.
Sure. And we certainly promote like the Valley CDC homeownership program. So whenever Valley is promoting, like trying to fill affordable housing, so when 132 Northampton Road came online, like we promote those kinds of opportunities. So it's trying to like be a partner to you all around housing opportunities, because it's like, how do we get the word out about what's going on? And so just know that like that's again one of the ways in which partnership can operate.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's helpful to know, and really promoting the ADU building initiative that we're building will be really helpful because it is a very target demographic of people who might build it. One thing that your comment made me think of is, and like really hearing that like you have an educational mission that like your funds need to be oriented towards, and the limits of land donation and partnership, is that we toured like a UMass project where every year they build a tiny home with their students. And that made us think that there's a possibility, or it would be a good model as we're moving into ADUs, to have a set of like 3 or 4 designs that the town has like pre-approved that they fit the code requirements, and making those publicly available to people as a way to reduce the cost of ADU building. So, we haven't talked with any specific partner who's ready to take that up that I know of. Greg, correct me if I'm wrong, but like that's something that I don't know if you have a Department of Architecture, or, like a faculty who's interested in innovating those kinds of things, even if it's not the ADU designs in and of itself. But if, you have like farming in ecology, like there's different ways that you could be like, here's a site design plan for building an ADU near wetland. Like, there's all kinds of challenges that come up with building, that as much as we have like resources that move from a professor's class and brain and into the public domain with the trust or the town as the intermediary that can hold that would be helpful. So there's a lot of like, those are like what I think of as like little things, or things that are very contextually dependent on what kind of brain power or interest is available. And like your bigger question about the going in circles and like what the priorities are, is like, we as a trust just determined our strategic priorities, and then we're in the housing production plan that will come out soon. But even with that, you'll see, and you've been studying it from the numbers, that the need is almost everywhere. And so when I step back and think of it as like a community organizer or somebody who might work in coalitions, the question is like, there's any number of ways we could slice it to get the work done. And part of that will just be who is interested, because we can't make any partner do anything, right? So it's like, there's going to be nonprofit developers, there's going to be for-profit developers, there's going to be homeowners who are developing, there are going to be homeowners who donate their home to a land trust, right? Like there's all different ways that we could get to where we need to get to with our strategies. And so it's like volleying the pickleball back to you. I don't play pickleball. This is really a stretch for me to say like what kind of leadership or innovation can you take, and do you want to take, and which piece of this will you bite off? And as we're having these conversations, it's helpful, and hopefully it can be helpful to cycle back to say, if you say to us, actually the idea of like an ADU revolving loan funding was interesting to us, then somebody else comes and says, I want to do an ADU revolving loan project. We can be like, that's cool. Amherst College also does. And then they're like, oh, I don't want to duplicate efforts. And then they might go, like we could be like, well, before you leave, talk to each other. Like there's all different ways that we can serve, as the more that people share with us what they're thinking about or interested in, the more we can liaison to try to move people forward. But my real hope is that by putting out the housing production plan or having strategic priorities, that we can get people to spin for less time and move quicker, because obviously there's urgency and also limitations, and yeah, we just need to get it done.
And I appreciate you taking an organizing approach to this, because I think that that's actually what it is. And when you organize, you go around and you understand everyone's self-interest. And so like Amherst College's interest is going to be one thing, my interest personally is going to be potentially something else. And so it's like understanding what's motivating people, and then, having like good communication among your stakeholders and bringing people together. And that's why I think the housing production plan and also the downtown design standards working group has been another place where the housing conversation has been happening. And so it's like, how are you bringing people along and kind of saying like, oh, this person is interested in ADUs, so is this person, and like making those connections. Because to go back to what Greg was saying earlier, like I do think it's going to end up being like the many steps that are going to help get us to the whole. Because I think that when I first like really was focused on housing, I was thinking that it was going to be something bigger or splashier or, faster, and that's not what's happened. And so part of it is like, how do I recalibrate in order to move forward? Now, let's take the ADU thing as a great example. And, I'm excited about the conversation, all that sort of stuff. We're a liberal arts college, which means nothing applied. So we think a lot, but we have an extraordinary design and construction department. And they're creative and innovative. And I think that they were really involved in how the Stanley Street houses were shaped for habitat. And so, if ADU things are of interest and you kind of want to model something, then what I can do is go talk to the design and construction team and say like, hey, Housing Trust is like thinking about this, is there a downtown property where we might stand up an ADU that could be part of an example, or just like those kinds of things. And that's what I think the partnership and the collaboration looks like, is that we're all kind of trying to push things together along the way. Or I can go back to this faculty member that was asking about ADUs and say, hey, had this meeting with the Housing Trust, they're looking for people that might pilot this. Would you be interested in like being a pilot site? And so it's kind of like, that's the organizing piece. And going from person to person. I will say one of the things that Amherst College did early along in Michael Elliott's president is we hosted a conversation about housing with Mindy Dom and someone who I don't know if any of you were there for that meeting or if this is like before your tenure, but it was one of the few times that people had sort of come together across different interests to have sort of a fuller conversation around housing. So I have definitely been asked multiple times if Amherst College can be a convener. And that's certainly of interest, but I would also say that Five Colleges, so Five College Inc., is very interested in housing because all of the leaders of the institutions are. And so Five Colleges can function as a convener as well. And so and maybe this is a partnership conversation to have with Greg kind of in the future about what kind of organizing and community building needs to happen around this housing conversation, who needs to be in the room. Wesleyan down in Middletown, their community engagement office, and I think Bates does this too, would host like monthly luncheons for people in certain areas. So like the arts and culture people would come together for lunch like every first Wednesday of the month, because it was important to have a convener that was holding space for these conversations. And it's the informal stuff where people can see each other and talk about what's going on and all. So municipal government does not necessarily lend itself to that kind of action. But as you think about the work ahead and what is it you want to do, maybe convening is important. So just my hope is that this is not the only time we talk about these things. As I said, housing is like my favorite topic, and anyone who will tell me what they know and share with me information, I'm all in. But just the thing that I would leave with, because we're getting kind of towards the end of our meeting, is that like housing is of great interest. We do college really well, and are still trying to figure out where we might be good partners in the housing conversation. And I swear I'm not trying to avoid a commitment. It's just really like that's the reality. for us.
Well, picking up on the convening, and sorry, I have to be somewhere physically at noon. We are imagining an educational community event on ADUs in some months' time, where we bring together lenders and et cetera, builders ideally, and so that would certainly be a fantastic event to partner with you in putting on.
Yeah. And we have space, you know, I mean, like that's one of the things, again, like what does Amherst College potentially bring to the table? You know, we have a college, we have some chairs, you know, we have food, you know, just kind of like, you know, what do you need in order to host an event? And, you know, just kind of like know that we're available as a partner in kind of ways that you might not expect.
Yeah. And if I could, I just want to also, yeah, I think that is a great idea. And specifically, you know, from my seat kind of like in the town government, in my laundry room, you know, here, I, I'm just increasingly aware of the vital need for dialogue outside of the sort of envelope of government, you know, and you know we need to trust like kind of push that envelope, you know, to a fair amount. You know, we've really tried to like stretch our function beyond just like fun, you know, of being a funding mechanism, and that's it. But even so, we're still an instrument of town government. You know, we're still you know, there's certain sort of restrictions that just don't, where it's harder to have open conversations. It's harder to, you know, have open invites, you know, and get, um, you know, be really, um, you know, I guess so. I guess I could go on, but I guess the point is like I think just the you know action outside of like you know the governmental umbrella, you know, dialogue, exploration, advocacy, all that stuff. I think it's vital, and I think it can lead probably to some dead ends, but also to some creative places that we might not be able to arrive to. So that's
We all bring different skills. I want to share a related story, sort of. So a lot of times people have ideas about what a college can contribute to the community. Early in my time at Amherst, I was the board president at the Survival Center when we moved from the old building to the new building. And so Mindy Don was the executive director, new building, super exciting, did not have a plan for cleaning. Okay, and so if anyone was in the old building, it was a basement, like, you know, volunteers handled it, but then it was like a huge new commercial space, so many more people. And the place was like getting dirty and like it was just like, oh my gosh, what do we do? So Mindy and I were struggling, and I was like, wait, Amherst College has facilities. I'm going to call the head of facilities and see if they can help us figure this out. So this guy, Mick Colby, came over and he talked to Mindy. He designed the cleaning protocol for the Amherst Survival Center, and then helped the Survival Center hire a custodian in order to like do the type of cleaning that volunteers couldn't do. And it was transformative. I mean, certainly we could have sent volunteers to like pack food, serve meals, all of that sort of stuff, but it was like bringing the technical expertise of the facility staff to a real challenge at the survival center that made a meaningful impact. So like, as you think about these kinds of things, just remember there's some technical expertise as well in terms of buildings, design and construction, you know, just there are creative ways that we can partner. And just, again, really excited about housing. I think we all have a role to play in this work. And I'm just so grateful for the time that you all put in. Some of you as volunteers, some of you as paid staff, because it is a crisis in the community. And just I really appreciate what you're doing.
great.
Oh, thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Yeah, really,
So,
thanks.
Greg, you've invited Sarah to join one of our open meetings?
Sorry, what's that, Gaston?
Did you invite Sarah to join one of our Thursday night meetings in the future?
Oh, sure. Yeah. One
Yeah.
of the trust meetings. Yeah. I mean, I think like maybe we should all talk about like kind of the best way to structure that, like, you know, and, you know, and timing, you know, but yeah, Sarah, we'd, you know, love at some point to have you, join us for the full trust and, you know, and this does, you know, I think, you know, sync very nicely with a couple of our core strategic plan, elements here that we've been talking about. So,
Great.
great. Awesome.
Sir.
Well, it's been a joy to spend
Thanks so
time with
much,
all of
Sarah.
you. Good luck, okay? And I will continue
right.
with your work with great anticipation and excitement, okay?
Great.
Fantastic.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Can trust members stay on for a minute just to talk about scheduling?
Sure.
Okay.
All right, so are we, is this our time? Forgive me, I should know that. Do we, is this a regular window here?
It should be, but let's look at what date would it be in February?
All right, it would be
20th?
Today is
yeah, it would be the 20th. Oh, yeah, and I think they actually popped in a staff meeting into that window.
Yeah, I'm not open. Well, I could in theory do. Yeah, it's not an ideal day for me either, I guess.
Yeah, nor I. That is, my kids are on holiday break that week, so.
So maybe should I send a doodle out or similar to identify a regular time for this group?
Sure.
maybe a regular time is going to be hard, and we just need to do it if I
Yeah,
don't know.
just pick a date in February. I mean, it could be
Okay.
the 13th, the week before.
Sorry,
or the
I'm in an
27th, the week after. Maybe.
Okay, or
Yeah.
the week after, the 27th.
yeah, that would
Works
work
for me.
better for me.
The
Works for
27th.
me as well.
Okay,
Do you
let's do
still
that.
have a staff meeting at 11, Greg?
No,
Is that
just
every week?
monthly, not weekly. So 27th at 11, I'll send that out. And I do have some ADU data and vacancy stuff, but we can maybe get to that next time. And I, you know, I guess Gaston and I will try and converse about getting agendas out for this. And you know, we had Sarah and I the ADU thing, but that was kind of it. But we can. I don't think y'all ever received a formal agenda. Sorry about that. It did get posted. I just don't think we ever did it internally.
Got it.
All right.
That's okay.
Cool,
Okay.
thanks.
But yeah, I thought that was great though. Thank you all very much.
That was wonderful. Great. Thanks
Thank
Yeah.
you.
so much for
Bye-bye.
setting
Thanks,
it up.
everyone. Have a good day.
Take care.
Yep.
You
So
too.
long.
Bye.